Welcome everyone to Prosecutors Center for Excellence's webinar on improving recruitment and retention. My name is Christine Hammond. I'm the Executive Director of Prosecutors Center for Excellence. We are so lucky to have a number of wonderful presenters that are going to be discussing the many aspects of this issue that is a problem and a concern for prosecutors all around the country. Turning it over to Kimberly Spejos, who is the Chief Resource Prosecutor for the North Carolina Conference of District Attorneys. So thank you so much for joining us, Kimberly. Again, please look at her bio in our booklet. Kimberly, could you give us an overview of this issue and how the new attorneys that are coming out of law schools are impacted by the various issues that you're going to be discussing?
Absolutely. And it's really an honor for me, Chris, to talk about this topic. It could not be more important or more timely than it is right now. And so I'm really impressed that we are discussing this on a national level. I want to start by saying, oftentimes, while we believe prosecutors are special, and we are special in a lot of ways, this recruitment and retention phenomenon right now is really impacting the entire workforce. 36% of HR professionals say that recruitment is their top challenge. And that's across the board for everyone coming into the workplace. And so when we're talking about working in the criminal justice system and specifically working as prosecutors, I think it's so important for us to understand what law students are focusing on right now. The people that are coming into our profession, what's important to them? What are they looking for? What is their focus? And when we think about that, we cannot deny the impact nationwide that social justice reform and the social justice movement has had on recruitment and on the mindset of law students. And we also can't discount the impact that COVID and the pandemic has had on both recruitment and retention. What the statistics show us is that 35% of employees across the board are going to leave their job in 2023. And really, as I mentioned, this is recruitment and retention is at the very top of every human resource professional's list of things that they need to focus on. Just to share a few statistics with you that are North Carolina specific. For us, our prosecutor applicants are down 31%, and it's even higher than 31% in our rural districts across the state. And it's not just prosecutors, it's also the administrative staff, the legal assistants, the victim advocates, and the investigators that are working in our offices. And for us in North Carolina, we have a 38% decrease in those applicants from just 3 years ago. And that really is higher in urban districts. So that was an interesting thing for me to look at, that in rural districts in our state, we have a higher percentage of applicants that are down for prosecutors, but in urban districts, the higher percentage is in the administrative professionals. And from a retention standpoint, since we're looking at both recruitment and retention, just again, for another example in North Carolina, our turnover rate is up 29% for our administrative professionals, and it's up 37% for our prosecutors. And the retention percentages are much higher in urban areas than they are in rural areas. So when we look at that, we need to think about, why is this happening? And why is it happening at such a high percentage in prosecutor offices? So I want to go back a little bit now to talking about recruitment and talking about what it is that law students, people that are coming into the field, those new lawyers that we'd be recruiting for new positions in prosecutor offices across our country, what is it that they're looking for? What is it that they want? And so I want to overarch everything you hear today with you thinking about this recruitment process the same way we think about jury selection. And what I mean by that is we're not the only ones doing the picking. Just like when we are in jury selection, we're not just the ones trying to choose the jurors that are best suited for this case. We know that they're making assessments about us every step of the way during that jury selection process. The same thing is happening in your recruitment process. And so we're not at the place anymore that we have a huge list of resumes of people waiting to come into the DA's offices. And we have to realize that in addition to us trying to find the right fit for our offices, these incoming new lawyers, they're really looking for the right fit too. And so we have to come at this process differently than we have in the past. What we know is that student loan debt is higher than ever. We know that people are coming into this field of work with debt over $130,000, $140,000, $150,000. And so for recruitment, money and salary has always been interesting and been a top priority, but it's taking a back seat now to people coming into the workforce to how does the organization reflect their value system? And we need to understand that. People who are coming into the workforce in general, and specifically those that are coming into prosecutors' offices, are looking to find a space where what's important to them, the values that they exhibit in their personal and professional life, they want to see those values in the professional offices that they go to work in. We know that that's a little different than in the past. But what is not different is from a retention standpoint. While people may be enticed to go to a job for salary, that is absolutely not why they stay in positions. And so we need to remember that as leaders in our offices, that organizational culture is so important. Over the last 6 weeks, I have had meetings with the Career Development and Services Department at every law school that is in North Carolina. And what I have heard repeatedly is that the incoming surveys that they're doing of students that are coming into law school, the primary focus of those that are interested in criminal law say that the top thing that they're interested in is criminal justice, social justice reform. And so it's really important that as prosecutors, we show those new potential lawyers and those new potential prosecutors how they can have a greater impact in our offices than they can anywhere else. We need to make sure that they understand that coming into a prosecutor's office is where you have the most discretion to make the most impact in your community and the most impact in the criminal justice system. So while I've given you a broad brush stroke of some of the issues that are out there right now, I'd like to end my time before we move on to the next speaker with giving you just a few ideas of some of the ways that you can look at the issues that I have just mentioned and how do you incorporate and implement into your recruitment process and your retention strategies, techniques that will help you build and continue to build strong offices, but also keep those folks in place. First, it's really important that you create an exceptional onboarding experience. All of the research shows that that onboarding experience should be more than just what might have been familiar to many of you who have been in this work for a long time, where you kind of come in and you get a docket and somebody says, here's your courtroom, go have at it. Our work and our process of bringing people on board in our office, we just can't skip on the first steps. We just can't skimp on the first steps. And we have to focus more on the organizational culture of our office than the logistics. And so really folks need to see and realize very early on how they can connect internally with the teams in our office, but also with the things that are most important to them. They need to see very quickly how your organization is going to reflect the values of the community. It's also really critical that you connect people early on with mentors in your office, because this onboarding process is your first opportunity to connect and it's your first opportunity to integrate. Next, you've got to build team engagement, not just assume that it's there. And in fact, even if you have historically had in your office a strong mentor program, or you've historically had what you thought was, really strong team engagement, with the backlog issues that we're facing now and the current decrease in staff and open positions, our employees, our team members are feeling more pressure than ever. And when they're feeling more pressure than ever with the substantive work that they have to do, they are spending less time on engaging with each other and less time on engaging and mentoring new members of your team. And so only 21% of employees across the board right now say that they are truly engaged. And you want people to be engaged. You want to build that team engagement, because when you do that, your folks say, my work group has a strong sense of team spirit. People are proud to tell others that they work for your organization when they feel engaged with the organization, and they're more committed to your office's success. When people feel a strong sense of team engagement, they say that they would work harder for longer hours if it demands it, but they also feel personally effective at their job. And so that needs to be a real focus of the work that you're doing in order to both recruit and retain. Next, you have to provide professional development. The folks that are coming into the workforce now want to grow. They want to grow individually and they want to grow in their own profession. And so it's important that you have a plan that you share in your job postings. If you are using the same job posting for open prosecutor positions that you used 5 years ago, that's your first problem. You really need to jazz up that job description. People need to know that they're coming into an environment where they're going to have professional support. People also need to know most of your offices, I'm sure, provide free or very, very low cost legal education where they can get their required hours for what your state bar or state bar associations require. You need to promote that. You need to let people know in the job descriptions that they're coming into an office that focuses on well-being and wellness, but also focuses on team spirit and from a value structure. And so you really need to think about, what does that job posting look like to link people in? And then once they get into your office, they need to know they're going to have the opportunity to develop professionally, to learn and to grow. Next, you've got to concentrate on an organizational culture. Now, I know that most of people might be sitting out there going, we're just trying to figure out how we can get our cases on the calendar to a jury and disposed. We've got more cases than we've ever had, and the pandemic has put us in a bad space. But if you don't focus on creating and promoting that organizational culture, you're going to lose new employees, and you're going to lose those that have been on your team. So spend some time with your team defining what your organizational values are, and make your office one that focuses on relationships. When we invest in people, everything else works itself out. So you want to create that spirit of community in your office that people feel from the very first call they get for an interview, because nearly half of employees in any profession would leave their current job for a lower paying job with an organization that has a better culture. And so that's really important for you to focus on your organizational culture and make sure people know about it. And then you have to have a team that encourages, gives feedback, gives acknowledgement, and gives recognition. And I don't mean here just the blanket thank you. I mean, you need to tie together people's workspace and their work performance with specific pieces of advice, feedback, and engagement. You want to implement meaningful personal recognition, and you want to not just celebrate victories. As prosecutors, we've been pretty good at learning how to celebrate the victory at trial, the guilty verdict for someone that really creates a public safety threat. But we also need to remember to celebrate people's values, uncompromising integrity, a spirit of teamwork. You want to celebrate those things as well. And then last, but certainly not least, you want to focus on work-life blend. We talk a lot about balance, and I'm not a fan of discussing work-life balance, because when you use the word balance, it inherently means that anything can throw you off your balance. And so you want to know that and understand it. But you also want people to get that right blend. When something's blended well, it's hard to separate it out. Once you put all those ingredients into a cake, you can't separate the flour back out from the eggs. And so you want people's work and the blend of their work and their life to really put them in a place that they're not experiencing quick burnout. And so those would just be a few tips for you to model and for you to think about as you reach a very different population of people coming into the workforce, and also a changed population that have been doing this work for a long time.
Well, thank you, Kimberly. As you can tell, we covered a lot there, and that was a wonderful overview. And we will now turn to Sheila Polk, who is the county attorney of Yavapai County in Arizona, who is going to talk about one aspect of what you were saying, Kimberly, about, and it goes probably, and I'll let her speak to it, to the notion of blend, of how do you blend that work life combo. So I'd like to turn it over to Sheila Polk. Again, I encourage you to read the bio to learn more about her very extraordinary background.
Thank you, Christine, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. I am Sheila Polk. I'm the elected lead of the Yavapai County Attorney's Office. We are one of 15 counties here in Arizona. Our population is about 250,000 people, and my office has 112 employees. So going back to March of 2020, when COVID hit, I was able to get a state recovery fund grant and purchase for every single employee remote virtual desks. This allowed me to send everybody home. And so everybody began working remotely on a temporary basis back in March of 2020. We had to make a few exceptions, of course. A few folks came into the office to make sure that paper was moving, but for the most part, everybody was working at home. When we started coming out of COVID, and I realized we're not out of COVID yet, but as offices began reopening, I held a series of small group meetings with our employees, asking them what they thought the future should look like. And what I heard loud and clear from everybody was they really wanted the remote option to be made permanent. So that is what we did. Officially, as of July 1 of 2021, I now have a permanent remote work option in place for all of the employees. Just as of last week, of 112 employees, 37% of let me back up. So we have three options. You can choose to work in the office 100%. You can choose to be at what we call a hybrid employee. So you work in the office 3 days or more, and you can work 2 at a remote work site, or you can be 100% remote. And the significance, the difference between being remote and being office or hybrid is remote workers do not have a designated workplace at the county attorney's office. The other two groups do. I let everybody choose, and they can move kind of in and out of these three categories, obviously with adequate notice, because we have to make some internal changes. But as of last week, we have 17% of the employees who have chosen to work 100% in the office, 35% who have chosen to work 100% remotely, and then 48% who are hybrid. For the attorneys, I've got 41 attorneys, 6 work in the office full-time, 15 are hybrid, and then another 20 have chosen to work remotely 100% of the time. A few things to make it work. First of all, my office, we transitioned to electronic cases back in 2016. We have a database, an office software system called Prosecutor by Carpel. That has made it possible to do what we're doing. The second thing is we have Microsoft, the Outlook suite. We have Microsoft Teams. I worked with our judges back when everybody was really working remotely. Our judges, they were able to adapt to Microsoft Teams appearances. So to this day, we still do a lot of virtual appearances for our cases, for both our civil and our criminal cases. Those two things have made it possible for us to continue on a permanent basis with this remote work status. I truly believe that this is a very, very significant recruitment and retention tool. I am at almost 100% in terms of filled positions. I say almost because couple of weeks ago, we actually let go one employee from our victim services division. Had nothing to do with the remote work option. It was a performance issue. But I only have one vacancy right now. All my attorney positions are filled. All of our litigation specialists, all of our other victim advocates, we are filled. And in fact, last fall, my board of supervisors awarded my office with 3 additional prosecutors and 1 additional litigation specialist. So we have been able to fill all of those positions. Of our positions, we have 8 people who do not even live in Yavapai County. So they are residing in another location in the state of Arizona. By law, attorneys have to live in the state of Arizona. So 7 of the 41 attorneys do not reside in Yavapai County. Now, all of the employees who elect to work remotely, they have to agree to a number of things. I have them sign essentially, it's a memorandum of understanding. They acknowledge that working remotely is a privilege, not a right, that it can be revoked at any time. They acknowledge that this ability to work remotely is not a substitute for daycare or family care. And everybody who is new to the office does start in the office. And so every new employee will spend time in the office until such time as that new employee and his or her supervisor feel that they are ready to, if the employee wants to transition to a hybrid or a remote, then it's really by agreement of those 2 individuals. So yes, I think it is a very, very significant recruitment and retention tool. I'm hearing from my folks that they appreciate this opportunity, the flexibility that the remote work environment provides them. How do I ensure that the work of the office is getting done? Well, through Prosecutor by Carpel, we can see who is doing what. And so the acronym for Prosecutor by Carpel is PBK. We can run any number of reports. I personally can actually get on anybody, any of my employees. I can get on PBK. I can look at their to-do list. It's called the view. And so we can check up, we run reports. But frankly, if somebody isn't getting the job done, we're going to hear from other people as well. So I'm going to hear from the judges. I'm going to hear from our police officers. I'm going to hear from victims in the community. And we have had no drop off in productivity. When we first implemented the remote work option, I met with everyone in the office. They wanted it to happen. And so I really pushed back on them to say, then you show me the way. You show me how this can work. I trust all of you, and you are the ones to make it work. And so I really feel the office wants it. I know they love it. I did a survey not too long ago, got lots of positive feedback. They want that option to continue. So what changes have I made to make sure the distribution of work is fair and that remote employees understand what is expected of them? We really didn't make too many changes. We do have for our litigation specialists, we do have a requirement that even if they are remote, they have to work 1 day in the office each week. And that's because of PBK and our electronic case filing system. We start with taking paper and we put it into the system. So every piece of paper that comes in the door has to be scanned in. And so the supervisors for all of our different divisions, they will decide among themselves. They create that schedule for a litigation specialist to what day of the week he or she is going to work in the office. And we've been able I've relied heavily on supervisors to monitor workloads to make sure that workloads remain fair, whether you are remote, hybrid, or if you are in the office 100%. Early on, the issue we did have was that folks who had chosen to be in the office, walk-in traffic was falling on them, calls, etc. So we addressed that and we worked out a system to make sure that the people who are choosing to work in the office are not carrying an undue or an unfair burden. And then we did make some changes internally to the physical environment to support this remote work option. As I said earlier, employees who have chosen the remote option do not have a designated work spot, but we created what we call hot desks and hot offices. And we have a calendar system. So if an attorney who is working remotely is going to be in trial, wants to have an office to work out of for a few days, he or she can get on the calendar, reserve one of the hot offices. We repurposed a lot of the space that used to be dedicated workspace for the employees who are now remote. And so we created more conference rooms. What we found is for the folks who are working remotely, obviously they still need a place for meetings. They need to meet with police officers and witnesses and victims. And so we repurposed some of the offices into small conference rooms. And then one of the favorite things we did is we created what we call the lounge. And so we opened up a pretty large area in our office. We took out the cubicles, we took out the desks. It is an area for everyone to use however they want. We furnished it from Facebook Marketplace with very few dollars, but we have nice arrangements of chairs. We have a table, a coffee table. And the goal is you might just want to feel more social. So you might be a remote worker, but you want to come in for the day, but you don't want to go into an office. And so the goal is to allow those individuals, bring your laptop because everything is on your laptop. Just come and hang out in the lounge. We also hold a lot of meetings in the lounge now. My goal is to create a more open environment. And unless a meeting has to be behind closed doors, most of our meetings are now taking place in that lounge area. So, the last thing I will say, circling back to Kimberly's point about office values, and one of the challenges is when I don't see my employees as often as I used to, how do I still create that sense of community? How do I let them know that I care? And how do I share my office values with them? So we implemented for all of the new employees a new employee orientation. They have 2 months to complete a list of about 16 different items. Most of them are to conduct 20-minute interviews of other positions within the office. It's a way for them to get to know one another. But on every single new employee orientation, they have to interview the county attorney to learn about my shared office values. And then the second thing I started is I personally now do our in-office trainings. So twice a month, we do top quality office trainings. A group of my employees will be required to come personally for that training, and then the rest can be there virtually. But I will introduce our trainer. I stay for the training. We do other announcements at the same time. But that's another way for me to stay connected, for my employees to stay connected with each other, and really to address probably one of the biggest issues that you're all thinking with the remote work option is, how do we do that spontaneous collaboration? And how do we make sure that we build positive relationships among our employees?
Well, thank you, Sheila. You have encapsulated in a short period of time a lot of work and thinking that's gone into a whole new approach to prosecution. I'm now going to turn it over to Sophia for 10 minutes to ask you and Kimberly the questions that we are getting through our chat. So I'll turn it over to them.
And Kimberly, starting with you, some of the viewers would like to know if you have suggestions for keeping the recognition from getting stale. So can you provide a few examples of recognition that you've seen that kind of keeps it moving along?
Sure, absolutely. First, I would remind us that, we're all lawyers, so words are important, and we need to think about how we title any formal recognitions. And so I have worked really hard to eliminate the word employee from my vocabulary. And we talk about having teams and people being on our teams. And that word just means something very different than employee. A person on my team just last week said, I really love working for you. And I said, you don't work for me. You work with me and we work together. And so I think it's really important for us to think about that. And so get creative with the titles that you have for any kind of standardized or regular recognitions. So instead of it being an employee of the month, it can be the team member above and beyond award. That kind of opens up the thought of what you're asking people to nominate folks for. When I think of Employee of the Month, I think that that's been a title that's been out there for a long time. I think maybe it means that it has to be the top employee in the whole organization for that month. But when I hear the Above and Beyond Award, what that says to me is that this is somebody that's done something a little extra during whatever time period we're talking about. The other thing that I think is so important is you want to tie any recognitions to specific incidents or specific achievements. That's what makes it meaningful for the person that is receiving the award. And it also shows that you've taken the time to really think about that acknowledgement. And then last, I would tell you that things don't have to be so formal. I do a lot of training about leadership and how important leadership is. And one of the things that somebody suggested to me they had done that's on a very low budget is they created in their office a Post-it wall. And what they do is they encourage people to take Post-it notes and just write positive things or accolades, attaboys or attagirls for folks that are in their office. And then they just put them up. And then it creates a spirit among your office where you're in a constant state of recognition, encouragement, and feedback.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Sheila, we've got some questions for you as well. With regard to differences between those that are working remotely and those who are in person, have you noticed any difference in trial work?
We have not noticed any difference. Obviously, all employees do have to come to the office if a supervisor wants them in the office that day for a meeting, or if I'm requiring them to come in for training. And I will see spontaneous meetings of folks who are in trial in that lounge area as they're still brainstorming. We have this office, the Microsoft Teams, which still allows everyone to put eyes on each other. The only difference is it's not in person, it's doing very much what we're all doing right now. And what we are finding is that our folks are using that Teams video option frequently. And they're doing it very much as they used to spontaneously run into each other in the hallway and start chatting. So our folks have smaller groups that they have formed on the teams. And, they can call up each other anytime. I, by the way, can, anytime I want, I can just call via video one of my employees and I can see right then and there where they are or if they're not at their desk. But I'm not seeing any difference in trial work. We tried a record number of trials, by the way, in 2021, as we are playing catch up with the COVID backlog, and everyone's still doing really well.
With regard to the volume of electronic communication, have you noticed that that's more difficult to manage now that you have more remote workers? In other words, emails, Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, things of that nature.
I personally have noticed that, and I think that's probably what this question is referring to, but I carry my smartphone and I've got texts coming at me. I've got the messaging app on Teams coming at me. We have the emails, we have the phone calls, and we have the video phone calls. So yes, the volume of electronic communications has definitely increased. And what I have reminded my folks, particularly the supervisors, you have to be checking all of those. If you've got somebody, we are trying to get our folks to use Teams to message each other rather than sending text on cell phones. And so, but yes, the volume has certainly increased, and just, having as a process in the office, trying to get everybody to use the same mechanisms to communicate has been a bit of a challenge.
And with regard to the supervision, you had mentioned that you kind of put it back on your supervisors. Have you had any feedback from them about whether it's more difficult or easier or the same to manage the employees?
My supervisors love the remote option. Many of them are remote themselves. Okay. And so when issues have come up, they very eagerly figure out how to get them solved. They are huge proponents of Teams and spontaneous Teams meetings, when they can do it. or having folks come in primarily to our lounge area to do in-person meetings. But I feel, my employees are the ones who want this. Let me correct myself. My team members are the ones who want this. And they truly are making it happen. And I learned early on, I don't have to have the answer. I don't have to be the problem solver here. If the folks want it, let's develop it together and let's make it work together.
And one last question for you, Sheila, with regard to some of the more logistical issues, you mentioned that you had a grant which provided everybody with a laptop. What about cell phones or other equipment that might be needed at home? How much does your office supply, or what do you recommend that people supply in order to facilitate a robust home office environment?
We supplied everybody with laptops, with a monitor, and then with the docking station. We did not supply folks at home with printers. If they want to print, they can come into the office, but we are really discouraging being a paper office anyway. And then all employees that are not classified, in other words, not hourly, they already have the option to have a cell phone at the county expense, or if somebody wants just to have one cell phone, and then we give them a monthly stipend. Okay. So it allows them, it's the same. We didn't have to change anything with respect to our cell phones.
And Kimberly, one last question for you as well, just briefly, are there any mentorship activities that you've seen that are particularly helpful for developing that type of relationship?
I'm getting ready to offer something else that is outside the box a little bit, but I want to remind everybody that we can't grow if we don't change. And so I encourage you to think through this. One of the things that I've seen that's been really successful is early on, if you will partner up a newer prosecutor with someone on a pretty serious trial, it will link them in very quickly to your team. It will link them into the work that we do, and it will give them a broader understanding of victims and that focus part of our team. And it will also give them a broader perspective on the heavier work that we do. And so when I have seen offices that will do that early on, of course, you have to, partner them up with somebody experienced, but go ahead and give them the opportunity pretty early on to get involved in a high impact trial and a high impact case, and something that's complex and has great impact. That really tends to bring people forward and allow them to link in with the more experienced folks on your teams.
Thank you so much. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, that was, and we still have many other questions, but you've certainly touched on so many important topics. I now want to turn over our webinar to our next speaker, who is Sherry Bevan Walsh, who is the elected prosecutor in Summit County, Ohio. And she has done tremendous work in working with her team throughout the pandemic and continuing. So I turn it over to Sherry Bevan Walsh.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for inviting me to be here. Just for a little bit more background, the Summit County Prosecutor's Office is the 4th largest prosecutor's office in Ohio. We have about 220 employees. One thing different that we do at my office is I also oversee our child support enforcement agency. So I have a little over 100 employees at my child support enforcement agency. With respect to remote work, that is something we are still trying to tackle and figure out what to do. So I appreciated listening to what Sheila had to say. We have allowed a full-time remote option to all of our employees in our child support enforcement agency. So I have a little over 100 employees that are working full-time remote, and it opened up an entire floor for us. We are still exploring what to do in our other divisions, particularly our criminal division. Right now, we're just being very flexible with individuals who want to work remote because they have something specific that has come up that makes it easier for them to work from home. So we've been kind of allowing those on an as-needed basis, but we are looking at some of the options for something that might be a little bit more permanent. A couple of the things that we've done different, I've been in my position now for 20 years, and we've done a lot of different things just in the past couple of years, and they have worked out really well. And I really appreciated what Kimberly had to say, because we've been trying really hard to make some of the changes that she has suggested. But I'm just going to touch on a couple of the highlights. One, we have done a couple of surveys, and we'll probably be doing another one. Our most important survey was done early on when the pandemic started. It was an anonymous survey sent to all employees, and we asked a lot of questions about how they felt. Do they feel comfortable working remotely? Do they have all the tools that they need? Probably one of our more important questions was, are you comfortable going to your supervisor and expressing any concerns about some of our new work from home arrangements? We had not quite 100%, but I think it was around a 98% response to our survey. We were able to gather data. We were able to see what concerns our workers had and what they thought we were doing well and what we needed to improve upon. So that is something that we will probably initiate again at some point. One of the probably more popular things that I have done in the office that I have personally, as the elected prosecutor, really enjoyed. I feel like I know so much better almost every employee at my office, which was always a little bit tough when you have over 200 and we're located in different buildings in our county. So that adds a little bit of a challenge. But every Friday, and I've been doing this for a couple of years now, we call it our Friday Raffles. I send out an email to the entire staff and I ask a question or I ask them to share something. And then everybody's name gets put into a raffle and I just, with personal funds, buy gift cards that I award to people. But there's a lot of different things I put in the raffle and it allows everybody else to get to know each other. Some things are, what is your favorite restaurant and what do you like to order there? And then everybody kind of chimes in on where they like to go out to eat on the weekends. And then we put together a list of all the restaurants and what some of the specialties are. And we share that with the entire office. But probably my most popular raffle question, and I've done it maybe 4 or 5 times now, is I ask everyone to nominate a coworker who has done something positive or something helpful or just, something good that they've done in the past, month or so. And then the coworker who gets nominated, they get put into the raffle. I have probably the biggest response of all my raffle questions is when everybody gets to nominate their coworker. And, they'll say, my trial partner did this or my secretary did this. And then I also encourage everybody to share their responses with the entire office. Now, I'm mindful that it does create a lot of emails on Fridays for people, but I've had so many positive responses from staff who talk about how much better they feel like they know their coworkers, because people tend to know their coworkers in their division that they're in, but maybe not somebody in the child support enforcement agency. So everybody has really had the opportunity to learn more about each other. And then for myself as the elected prosecutor, and this does get time consuming for me, I send an email to every person who responds on the Friday raffle, just to that person from me. Something simple that just says, thank you for sharing, or sometimes I have a longer response. If they say something that maybe is personally meaningful to me in some way, I'll share something a little bit more detailed. But it's really given me a good chance to connect with, all the, and I do, like Kim, try to avoid saying all the employees in my office, but maybe all my, teammates in the office. I feel like they all know me better now because I'll share things too. And some of these questions have been really funny, share, what's the funniest thing that has happened to you in the past month, or, share something that maybe your child or grandchild said or did that made you laugh. And so everybody's reading these comments. And I've heard too, that they're sharing with each other. Like, I don't even see all the back and forth that goes on between, people that are sharing responses with each other. So that's something to think about. It's something, easy enough to do. And I do think people really appreciate it. And I've had some wonderful feedback. The other thing that we started a little more recently is monthly Prosecutor of the Month awards. And we've made them kind of like crazy fun. Supervisors can nominate one person, and we get 5 nominees per month. They all end up getting like a certificate. I know you probably can't really see it real well, but we have a Justice League Prosecutor of the Month certificate. If you get nominated, you get the crazy pen that says Summit County Prosecutor's Office, Justice League. And if you are selected, you get the crazy trophy that I don't know how well. My chief counsel, I don't know, went to some type of trophy shop and asked for the weirdest trophy they had that nobody ever picked up or whatever that we could use. So we have this crazy looking guy trophy, and the prosecutor gets to keep the trophy in their office for the next month until our next training. We do a monthly training for all our prosecutors. And then the last thing I'm going to share, but I don't know yet if I got it. In Ohio, is that my 2 minutes? There's some grant funding, the American Rescue Plan funding, and it allows us to ask for hiring bonuses and retention bonuses for all of my employees, not just the prosecutors, but all of the employees. And I think the range, there was a formula to use when we applied, and the range is around $7,000 for prosecutors, and it's divided up where you stay a couple of years, you get 5,000, a couple more years, you get 2 more thousand. And the same with secretaries, victim advocates, investigators. And I think the money we applied for those retention and hiring bonuses totaled about $600,000. And in addition to that, we applied for several more prosecutors to address our gun violence problem. So we are hopeful that some of those bonuses will also serve as a way in which to retain more prosecutors. But like Kim said, I agree that we're more likely to retain prosecutors by coming up with innovative and creative ways to really enhance our work environment.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I'm going to turn it over now to Shauna-Lisa Ochoa, but Sherry, after she's done, we're going to ask you some questions that we're getting from the chat. So hang on with us. We will now turn it over to Shauna-Lisa Ochoa, who is an assistant district attorney in the San Diego DA's office. Thanks so much, Sherry.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Hi, everybody. I'm going to go along with the rest of the group and tell you a little bit about my office. The San Diego District Attorney's Office is about 300, a little over 300 lawyers, deputy district attorneys, and then we have about 1,000 staff altogether. So it's a fairly big office, but we, like everyone else, are facing the exact same issues with hiring and retention and drawing people to our office. And I want to tell you a little bit about what myself and my chief created, which is the DA Academy. Sophia is going to be running my PowerPoint. I just wanted to give all of you some examples and some tactical things that you may be able to use if this seems like it might be a good project for you. So I've been fortunate in this office, since I've been an assistant chief, to work on the hiring and recruitment. And initially, when I joined this team, I had this vision myself of what a prosecutor is. So if you can go to the next slide. And I know when I talked to many of the students, the vision that they shared with me is on slide 2, which I'm sure is coming up any moment. Thanks, Sophia. But you'll see from this photograph, it's probably similar to what was the typical vision of a prosecutor and what you see in TV shows, Law and Order. You're very straight-laced, very conservative-looking clothing, your suits and court clothing, very traditional haircut, and really not anybody of any color. And so what I found from my experience is that wasn't at all how I envisioned myself, and I certainly don't fit that mold in any way. And so what I saw is what we see on slide 3. And this is how I envisioned myself, as somebody who is strong and powerful and of course stylish and captures the attention of the audience. But as much as I saw myself as a superhero, because, you know, we're the good guys, we wore the white hat and we are fighting for our most vulnerable victims, our elderly, our children, our people in the public who we want to protect safely. What that image that I envisioned, and as I spoke about my job as a prosecutor, was not being mirrored back to me by the students I was speaking with. I was honestly initially surprised to learn that the image of a prosecutor that was the previous slide is what the students had in their mind, was a very conservative, straight-laced, white male who many of them did not identify with in any way. And I learned through my conversations at these law schools that all of our public, but especially, the younger population, was really getting their vision and their opinion about what a DA does and how we do it through social media, whether it's through Snapchats or tweets or Facebook, but these little clippets of generally people who were unhappy with the system. Because let's face it, our victims aren't going on to social media and sharing their experiences. They're not talking about how happy they are with law enforcement or the DA who successfully prosecuted their case, because often they're still putting themselves back together from the harm that they endured. And when you pull back and realize that these social media sites with these 1-minute video clips or these, statements of people who are experiencing, not social justice reform, but maybe bias and not seeing diversity and feeling not part of this system. And then they're building kind of a community with these posts as people are clicking along and liking. I was seeing this over and over again, that the vision of who we are and what we do for the community really wasn't accurate, frankly. Not just that it wasn't the way I saw myself, but it wasn't who we are or what we do. And that's when my chief and I came up with the idea to create the DA Academy, to create our own narrative. We're tired of the media and other organizations, Innocence Projects or ACLU, and it's not that any of these organizations are bad, but they're certainly not us. They're not in our house. They don't know how we work and what we do. And we thought we need to drive our own narrative. We need to tell our story. And that's where we came up with the DA Academy. The DA Academy, I'm going to talk about this flyer in a second. The DA Academy in a nutshell is a 1-week program that we created in this office. And what it does is explain who we are and how we do it. That's what it is. We threw open the doors to our office and invited specifically L1s, so your first year law student, through an application process, to come into our office and learn about how we evaluate cases, how we receive reports, how we make issuing decisions, and everything else along the way. So we held the DA Academy in 2019 at one of our local law schools. And then in 2020, I was set to do the second round at a second law school here in San Diego, but COVID happened and of course shut that program down. So I want to talk to you some specifics about the program to see if it all might help any of you. What we did is design a program that shares all of the work that we do as if you were a district attorney. We really took ownership of the fact that these are going to be law school students who know very, very little about the law. Many of them, as an L1, might not have even been an intern yet. And so we wanted to specifically connect with L1s who hadn't already made up their mind, who hadn't experienced a lot yet, and reached out to them specifically. So What we did is I created this flyer and I worked directly with the first law school, which is Cal Western School of Law here in San Diego. And I worked with their career department in marketing the academy, and they bought into it wholeheartedly. They were very excited about it. I went to the specialty bars specifically so that I can connect with diverse student body. So all of the bar organizations, I met with them individually. I tried to actually stay away from the criminal law section and criminal law bar organizations because we have them. So that wasn't really my draw. I really went to like Black Student Union, La Raza. I went to the Asian Pacific Islanders organization, LGBTQ. I went to, I met with actually through some career things that the law school was having that was just open to all the students. I met with students who were former military. I met with students who this was their second career. I just talked it up to anybody and everybody who would listen to me. And the way that I drew these people into something that they were not instinctively interested in, because if they hadn't joined the criminal law society or that section.
2 minutes left.
Oh, okay. They weren't necessarily thinking about us as a potential hiring. So I brought food in, I brought interesting speakers, I brought people from my office who told their individual story as to why they joined the district attorney's office to build that personal connection. I want to just run through this real quick since I'm already running out of time. So here's a flyer. So it's like a mock one for you guys to see what I use. The second flyer on the next slide, this is a description, how I describe what the 1 week academy would be. I talked about, they're going to learn about making bail arguments, about how we issue, they're going to get to go to court. So I tried to entice the students with, specifically for L1s who hadn't interned yet, with things that they couldn't get yet through their law school experience, with court time and meeting judges and also developing mentors. So I thought that would be really helpful. And then the next slide, please. I want to show you the application process, the application that we did, because we did have a written application. We did not exclude it to people who say they wanted to be a prosecutor. In fact, that really wasn't at all what we were looking for. We were trying to throw our doors open and reach out to people who wouldn't be interested. So we were looking at this as a way to amplify our voice and amplify our narrative of who we are, which is exactly what it did. We had set a goal of about 30 students. I think we had 33. This is a copy of my agenda for the week-long DA Academy. We had lots of things that we did. We had a day where it was really learning about a case, like how we issue, and how we evaluate facts, how we charge, how we plea deal. We had a second day with mentors where they went to court. They watched preliminary hearings. They watched bail arguments. They met a couple of judges. We had a third day of advocacy where they learned how to do an opening statement and they learned how to do a direct exam. We also had a practice with media, if they had a media-worthy case. What was that like with the cameras? And then we had our media staff peppering them with questions. They loved that. That was exciting for them. And then we had our prevention day where we talked about the prevention activities that we do. We have a tattoo removal program. We do outreach. We volunteer at some elementary schools with our project lead teaching civics to fifth graders. We had our success agents and power lead where we also mentor third and fourth graders. Our care center that's out in the community that does a lot for our community as well. And then our last day was here at Juvenile where we talked to them how to become a DA intern, graduate law clerk, or DA1 in the future. And they met with our hiring team. The last slide is the inaugural class. Right there in the middle is our elected DA, Summer Stephan. We also had our assistant DA there, our hiring director, our trainer, and this is the class. From this class, we had two people that one is now at DA here, Another one worked all the way through at GLC, and I have 2 others that are DAs elsewhere. I stay in contact with many of these kids, becoming a mentor with them. So this is what we have done in San Diego. And now with COVID a little bit quieting down, we're looking forward to starting DA Academy over again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Shauna-Lisa, and you brought it in just in time for us to have some minutes to ask questions of both you and Sherry Bevan Walsh. So Sophia, could you just start with the questions?
Yes, thank you. Oh, hold on. You can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Sorry. We've talked, Sherry, specifically with you about mentorship and some of the awards geared towards prosecutors. Can you talk to us a little bit more about anything that you've done in terms of retention for staff or even recruitment for staff or other morale generating events that are really directed at your support staff?
First off, with respect to recruitment, like Kimberly said, you need to have a new job posting, and we did change our job posting. And, with the mindset of somebody reading this, will they really want to work here based upon what they read? So we'll see. We've only been using the newer one in the past year, and we are still struggling when it comes to applicants. As far as some of the other support staff, we do have a number of different luncheons that we do. Certainly everybody probably does the administrative professionals luncheon, but we do that for our administrative staff. In my child support enforcement agency, we have a summer picnic. And at that picnic, we recognize everybody and compliment them for their hard work. We also have various holiday luncheons where we really kind of talk up what, some of the office accomplishments are, and we recognize people for that as well. Also, one other thing I do, which is maybe a little bit of a smaller thing, but anytime I get some type of recognition letter or email, whether it be from a victim or a police officer, or anybody who's expressing something positive that one of my employees did, I oftentimes send a copy, but out to the entire office of over 200 people, and I put in there, I received this really nice commendation letter about our victim advocate, from the victim, and I share it for everybody to read. And then I put a complimentary note, from myself as well. But I do think there's always more that can be done. And we are always discussing new ways, in which to recognize people and make them feel valued at our organization.
Thank you. And Shauna-Lisa, people would like to know a little bit more about the schedule. When do you do this program, and how is it 1 week? Is it 1 day per week over multiple weeks?
Yes, thanks, Sophia. So we worked closely with the law school when we planned it, and we planned it right after the first year classes ended, before any internships or summer school would start. At Cal Western in particular, a lot of the students take a summer session. So we squeezed it right in that week. So I do recommend working with your law school. The second school I was going to do it with was University of San Diego Law School, and it was going to be during their spring break. So that school had a different recommendation. We did it for 5 days. We also, and that was because I wanted to show them as much about our office as possible. And I wanted to have a lot of hands-on practical exercises, which we did do. Like, we gave them police reports with redacted, victims' names and suspects' names, and worked through it with mentors through the office. We did like the practical, the media that I told you about, brought them out to the juvenile branch so they can experience what it's like here. They met with a lot of judges. So working with the law school, I think, is really critical for the timing. And honestly, there's not one way you can do this. You need to do what works for your office and for the law school. It's just what we did. We just powered through and had that 1 week dedicated. And then I reached out to DAs in my office. I didn't pull anybody outside of San Diego DA, and I relied on our in-house expertise. In my PowerPoint, which you guys all will get if you haven't already, You can see the agenda of what we covered. And also the last slide has my contact information. I'm happy to talk to anybody one-on-one. Our San Diego City attorney is also interested in doing this, and I've been coaching them on how to prepare it. They're going to do theirs, I think, just 2 days, and it might only be half days. So it's really, there's lots of ways you can do it.
And Sherry, can you tell us, do you have people that are specifically designated to work on recruitment or retention or career development issues? And if so, are they prosecutors, or are these people who are specially designated through human resources to do that kind of thing? And Shawnalise, I'm probably going to pose the same question to you because there may be different answers depending on the office.
We are obviously a fairly big office, but no, we do not have someone that's tasked solely with doing that. Although I think we certainly would have the work for somebody to make that their full-time job. So it's through a variety of people. I, as the elected prosecutor, end up working on a lot of this myself. Our chief counsel, who's right below me, he spends quite a bit of time on it. We also have a community outreach prosecutor, and she spends a lot of time on this. In fact, she was personally responsible for revamping our onboarding process and making it much more robust. So we have a personnel director, and she spends a little bit of time on that.
2 minutes left.
We have a communications director. He spends a little bit of time. So we kind of piecemeal it.
And Shawnalise, is there a different setup within the San Diego office?
A little bit. We do have an HR director, and she has a team. And so I worked with her in consultation to prepare the DA Academy. We also have a training department here, and I worked a little bit with our training department to select the speakers for each topic. We also have a hiring team here, which is consistent of DAs, and they go out to talk to the law school. So I consulted with them and brought them on as presenters. I have to say it's a team effort. And I used different levels of experienced DAs in different ways. Like we had a speed dating kind of event, like speed mentoring at the end of DA Academy on the last day. And I used only DA1s for that because I wanted people who were closest to the students to be able to relate to them. And I actually stepped out of the room so they could ask the questions that they wanted to without any supervisors being in the room. So it's team effort.
And thank you for your questions. I know we're not able to answer them all, but back to you, Chris, for our next speaker.
Thank you so much. As you can see, there are just so many ideas that people are starting to think about. It's so encouraging. We're now going to turn our attention to the law schools and see what is going on there. And our first presenter on that front is Noelle Dorman, who is the Assistant Director of Project and Employee Development at California Western School of Law. So I'd like to turn it over to Noelle.
Hi there, good morning. Thank you so much for asking me to participate. I really enjoy doing things like this and making sure I stay very engaged and up to date on what's going on with our valued employers. Just gonna kind of go over, I mean, so much amazing information has already been covered. So I'd say I agree and ditto, and we're seeing everything kind of exactly what you're saying. I agree with all of the new and progressive tactics that are being used in employee recruitment and retention. But I hopefully can offer a little bit from the perspective of our office and our law students who I do try and stay really in close touch with. And our recent grads too, and grads that have been out for a long time, actually. We really value our relationship with our alumni. We have some on this call and panel today, which is wonderful. So just a little bit about what a career services office does. I think you probably know, but for our office, we take our job very, very seriously. We see ourselves as advocates for our students and our grads, partners with our employers and the legal community. We kind of see ourselves as coaches and counselors, friends, resource support for our students, kind of whatever they need to help them with their career development. We start with the very basics with an orientation. For 1Ls, we have them meet with counselors in our office. We help them get their first drafts of their resumes and cover letters ready to go for recruiting programs. And then really kind of try and shout from the rooftops whenever there are deadlines coming up for applications or great panels coming up or networking mixers. We really encourage them to participate with outside bar organizations, to get that networking down and to meet people in the community and broaden their networks, create LinkedIn profiles, all this kind of stuff. And a lot of it, I think, sounds like common sense, but these guys don't know really what they're doing, and they do need a lot of hand holding a lot of the time. And so we do that for them. We've had to do a lot more with less, like probably many offices over the last couple of years. Our staff has been cut quite a bit. And so, but I don't think that's really stopped us. Again, I think everybody in my office, we take our jobs really seriously, and we really thrive on getting these students excellent opportunities. And so maintaining really good partnerships and relationships with our employers is key. And our prosecution offices in San Diego have been excellent partners. I think students come to Cal Western to work in government a lot of time in public service. We kind of were known for that. But we have seen exactly what you're seeing in this drop in interest in prosecution lately, and even just criminal law in general. But I'd say specifically prosecution, exactly what you guys are saying and seeing across the nation, really. So again, very interested and happy to partner with you to come up with good ways to get our students to apply for these great jobs. I think that probably answers a good amount of kind of what our office does. I mean, we work with our employers and our alumni to put on panels for our students so they know what does a prosecutor do versus a defense attorney. We put on a criminal law panel, a civil law panel every year to make sure our students know what their options are. But I will tell you what we're seeing for the last two 1L classes that have come in are when we take a survey of them in their orientation, we are now seeing a shift towards an interest in civil over criminal law. And that's new over the last couple of years. And I think that's definitely what you guys are seeing in application numbers. So that's just something in general that we're seeing. It has nothing to do with prosecution versus defense, just a difference in what the students are more interested in. I did see a drop absolutely in application numbers during our spring recruiting program this year. Our DA's office only got 9 applicants, where our public defender's office got 16. And both those numbers are horribly low in themselves, but 9 for the DA is really, really low. I did see an interesting uptick in, not really uptick, but a higher number in the city attorney applications. In the same period was 14, so kind of in between the two other numbers. And I thought it was really interesting that the city attorney got more than the DA, because that's not usually the case. I would say they're usually more equal, or the DA a little bit more. But the city attorney just changed their office name, and they use the term criminal justice in the title now. And I wonder, I don't know, but I wonder if that had something to do with it, based on some other information you guys have been already talking about today, and the perspective of newer law students coming in. But something to keep in mind. I think the revamped job descriptions is key. I see a lot of prosecutor offices from up and down the state using job listings literally from 10 and 20 years ago. I see some that don't have an online process yet, and they have paper applications still and weird things. And so I think kind of streamlining and getting just the application process in general easy and online is a good idea. But yeah, I'd say, again, maintaining relationships with your career services is a really solid idea. It sounds like everybody on this call kind of does that, but just to encourage colleagues around the country and state, keeping in close touch with folks like me in the office to let us know about upcoming programs, to work on these great things like this VA Academy that we've worked on with our DA's office here in San Diego. I think that's a great idea. But that partnership is key. And we've also, I feel like we've seen a change in our contacts in the DA's office lately, and that's caused a little, I should say, lack in communication sometimes with getting information from our office. So we used to always have one contact for a year or two at a time, and that's changed a lot lately. And I think it may just be a sign of the times and changing workplaces, but as much as we can have a consistent relationship with any recruiter in any office with lots of back and forth and communication about deadlines and needs and expectations is always going to be really helpful. I will also say, we do have the Innocence Project at Cal Western, and I think our students definitely have the mindset of social justice and criminal justice, and any office, prosecutor's office, that can show that they are progressive and do have these wrongful conviction units and things like that is a huge interest of our students, just kind of anecdotally from what I hear. I also was going to just kind of touch on some of the things I hear our students say, and I am now going to go into this next recruiting program more mindful and try to get more information from our students, as I think this is a hotter and hotter topic. But already I just know there's barriers, some things I think we can do some things about, and some things it's just the way they are. But GPA requirements can sometimes be a barrier for underrepresented students. The background check can be daunting or scary sometimes. We have some DA offices that we work with that will recruit 1Ls in the spring to work in the summer, but our San Diego office does not do that. So that's sometimes looked at as a deterrent, because these 1Ls, the first time they can apply in the spring recruiting, they can't apply for the DA's office for their first job in summer. So that's just one other thing I hear sometimes.
2 minutes left.
Thank you. Like for our public defender's office, for example, if a student's already in the public defender, they don't have to reapply every semester. The DA's office, they do. That could be looked at sometimes as a barrier. And then just in general, I'll have to say that regardless of office or anything, we've had a harder time just getting our message across to students about recruiting deadlines and getting their application materials in. They have so many things going on, so many competing interests and deadlines, and with COVID and moving everything online, it's just been a weird 2 years. So I'm hoping things get back into a more normal state, but we just have had a harder time reaching our students and engaging them in general. Again, I think it's a sign of the times and what you guys are seeing already. I'll probably just kind of wrap up there, but I do want to say, you guys you're not alone. It is not just your offices at all. It is just a weird recruiting time. I get employer emails almost daily now saying, I think you forgot to post our job listing. I haven't seen any applications. And this is for attorney positions and civil law jobs. And I say, no, I'm so sorry. I did put your listing up on our job board, but I can see only 5 people have looked at it and no one's applied yet. And it's just a funky time. It's kind of the way things are. So anything we can do together, I'm there with you guys to help. And I will wrap it up right there for now.
Well, thank you so much, Noelle. That's very helpful. I now want to turn it over to Barry Weiss, who was the administrative officer for the Onondaga DA's office in New York, which is Syracuse. But now he's a special advisor to the Office of Career Services at Syracuse University. So I now want to turn it over to Barry for his thoughts and comments on this very same subject.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, everybody. And I am still with the district attorney's office part-time. I retired a couple of years ago, and I am embedded, I guess, in career services at the law school at Syracuse University, which our office has been associated with for the entire length of time I have been here. But we were losing people because career services was non-existent. In fact, you're going to hear from one of our star ADAs in a moment who would have been lost if we were waiting for career services. He used a DA network of basically alumni to come find us, and we found him. So I know I'm not going to I'm embarrassing Alphonse, but that is true. Basically, I think one of the big things, and I agree with everything that has been said, is communication. I have been at the law school career services since December, and I have made an effort over that time to meet individually with every member of the faculty in their office. And every person I talk to, I hear, you're the first person from career services who's ever been in my office. And my response is, I'm probably also the first person from the DA's office ever to be in your office. And I get, oh, absolutely. In fact, there was one person who said, oh, your boss isn't progressive enough, compared to others. And I go, did you know that he started a drug diversion program in April of 1992? And they're like, no. And so it's basically I'm going door to door. I'm trying to change the attitude door to door, and the faculty, as much as the students, have to hear the message. And I've probably helped the cause a little bit because some of the professors all heard the first placement I made was in the White House Office of Drug Control Policy with an alumnus of Syracuse University Law School who was thrilled to have someone and placed him. Probably helped my credibility a little bit with the students as well. But it's listening, it's communicating. As Noel just said, these students need someone to talk to. They literally need a guide and someone to hold their hands. I was on the phone yesterday with an hour with a student who had just the basic, how do you start a relationship? I'm like, okay, you're asking me, but I went through it with them and talked to them. And it's recruiting. It's also collaborating among offices. For the first time in the 30 years with the district attorney's office here, we have communicated to Westchester and Queens. In fact, the Queens DA's office has hired 4 students from Syracuse University Law School. And I met them individually trying to go, what are your expectations after they've been hired? And many of them it was like, well, it's going to New York City and all that other stuff. I had to explain to them a little bit more what the job was. So we have to do even a better job of communicating what's going on. In New York State, we have the New York State Prosecutors Training Institute, which is a communicative group of everybody finding out jobs posting and research and communicating. And it's important. And thanks to Chris and Sophia for doing this, is people knowing what others are doing. That's a really essence. And I teach a class to undergraduates on the opioid crisis. And I have a group of speakers who come in and talking about what's practically going on. And most of the students all talk about, we never heard what was going on practically. That's a different perspective. And most of them are, the social justice, rah, let's change the world. And when they hear the different perspectives, I never realized there was another side to the story. We need to tell the other side of the story. And that's literally what I am doing person to person at the law school. One of the things over the last couple of years teaching a class, I've done more letters of recommendation than I have in probably 20 years. And I always ask these students, why me? And I always get the same response. You're the only one who listens to me. You're the only one who treats me as an adult, and the only one who's given me practical knowledge and experience that I can share. We need to extend, as the Academy in San Diego, extend our message to people all over and give those practical experiences to students, not only law students, but undergraduates. We have in our office, and have for 30 years, we have about 25 to 30 interns for the summer. 8 of them are law students. The rest are undergraduates. In fact, of the 110 employees, over a third were interns at one time or another. And if they're not here, they're in some other offices around the country. So it's communicating, it's literally telling our story. And we had an interview this morning with a Syracuse University law student who was asked, why us now? And they go, well, the impression I had of, being a prosecutor was different than what I've gained over the last year or two. And I want to be more community and victim minded. And that's the message we need to convey to people. We're helping victims, we're doing justice, and we're all doing justice together. We just need to communicate that and continue for down the road.
Thanks, Barry. Barry, do you feel like, I think you touched on it briefly, but maybe just to underscore it, that your professors at Syracuse Law School have an understanding of what goes on in the prosecutor's office?
Some do, in fact, but one of the things I've started to encourage both our new ADAs and the professor to communicate. I was talking to one professor who said, oh, are Doug and Caitlin still there? And I go, yes, in fact, they were just promoted to handling felony cases. This professor was absolutely thrilled. You could see the smile on her face, even through a mask. She goes, really? There? I go, yes. But she goes, I hadn't heard from him in a few years. So encouraging your employees who are from law school to communicate to the professors they have is another vehicle too. That, oh, we have a resource. I tell a lot of students looking for a job, who are your favorite professor? Reach out to them, communicate to them, ask them. They must know someone who is, either in a law firm or DA's office, a public defender. They have networks all over the country. Use them. But if the professors are flying blind, they're not help. In fact, the first professor I spoke to, every time I see him in the hall, he's waiting, hey, Barrett, how's it doing? And he doesn't say anything to anybody else. I see that. So you got to make the connection.
And again, just my last question before we're going to turn to our panel of new graduates is, what is your sense of how much law students understand of what the work of prosecutors actually is? What's their understanding of what it is?
I don't think they have any understanding. I don't think they have much understanding of many of the disciplines in the law, let alone the DA's office. I had one student who came to me like, oh, everyone tells me I should be a law clerk. I go, okay, why? Who's they? Well, we were at a party, we were talking about it. They get information from one another. They're not getting information from practical sources. And I finally said to this individual, do you like research and writing? And I go, no.
2 minutes left.
So I go, why would you want to do something you don't enjoy doing? And you could see the weight off of his shoulders, like, oh, thank you. I didn't really want to do it. So it's communicating and what we do.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So they're getting information from one another, and they might not have as much information as they probably need. Well, thank you for that. So we're now going to turn to yet another group of people who probably can speak most knowledgeably about many of our concerns here, and that is a group of relatively new prosecutors. And I want to introduce Malik Bezurami, Stephanie Dejes, and Alphonse Williams. Malik and Stephanie are both from the San Diego DA's office, and Alphonse is from the Syracuse DA's office in New York. So we are covering both coasts. And once we have our three young prosecutors, if you could just introduce yourselves and tell us what you're doing in your office, how long you've been in the office, and then I'm going to pose questions to you. And we really thank you for joining us, because you are our real audience. So if I could just start with Malik.
Well, it's good morning over here on the West Coast. Good afternoon over there on the East Coast. I have been with the District Attorney's Office here in San Diego since 2017. I started as an intern, and then I was officially brought on after I took the bar as a GLC. It's our post-bar clerkship program, and I started that in 2018. And after I successfully passed the bar and stressed out for those 3 months while I was working with the office and hoping I got hired, I finally was brought on in 2019. I've been with them since.
Thank you. Right before the pandemic. Great timing.
Yeah.
Stephanie, could you give us a little background?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Stephanie Dejes. I'm also with the DA's office here in San Diego County. I joined the office. I'm newer. I joined the office in June of 2021. Prior to being at the DA's office, I was at the city attorney's office for about 1.5 years. And then prior to that, I was actually active duty JAG for the Army from 2015 until October of 2019. And so, this is fairly new for me as far as being at the DA's office, but I love it. I'm currently in the Family Protection Division here in North County. And yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. And Alphonse, same question to you.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, West Coast. Good afternoon, East Coast. My name is Alphonse Williams. I'm an assistant district attorney in Onondaga County. I've been an assistant district attorney since 2017. I took a brief hiatus. I'm back, and I'm assigned to the Felony Trial Bureau, where we handle majority of the felony trial cases in Onondaga County.
So what we're all so anxious to hear, and you can tell that probably many of the people on this call are supervisors, recruiters, people who've been in a DA's office longer. We're so interested to hear what made you interested in applying and joining a DA's office. And we'll start in the same rotation. So Malik, can you tell us what your thoughts are?
So I actually was a third career law student. Prior to becoming a DA, I actually owned a juice bar in the community for a couple of years. Before that, I was actually a journalist, and I was living in the East Coast as well as in the Middle East for a bit. And prior to that, I actually did a short stint with the JAG, thinking I was going to go into law school right after I graduated from undergrad. I didn't know what a DA was, and I tell people that all the time because I had no idea. I read the case law in law school. I didn't realize that those things I was reading and those appeals all came from people that now are me in the trenches, trying to figure out how to bring justice to victims. I never was able to place it into the larger structure. I went to law school I'm first generation in terms of college, etc. After working at a juice bar and trying on so many hats, the one thing I realized that was a common thread was I wanted to do impact-based work. I'm adopted, and both my parents served in the military, so I kind of grew up with that in my background in terms of public service. I wasn't sure what the best means or vehicle to do that would be, so I explored journalism for a bit, trying to inform the public. I then decided to go try to fix other people's problems or understand them by going to Palestine and Israel and living there for a little bit. And then I realized ultimately I had to start at home. And that's why I opened up a business here. But once I got into the day-to-day aspects of that, what I realized was I really, really enjoyed setting up the business, finding out loopholes for small business owners, because it was so hard for me to set it up in comparison to the big Buffalo Wild Wings that was able to come in 1 month and have everything set up with their corporate structure. I thought I was going to do corporate tax law. I was working at a firm after my first year in law school. I thought I liked it. And then I realized that I didn't mind working. I've been working, I'm 34 now, I've been working since I can remember. I just didn't know if the juice was worth the squeeze in terms of the impact I was leaving, what I was having when I was doing environmental law on the defense side. It felt kind of crummy knowing that I was getting paid to help people avoid their penalties or try after they dumped a truckload of cement into a riverbed. I had an employee that I worked with at the law firm and said, "Hey, my husband works at the DA's office." And I said, "Hey, what is that? And can we call him?" She put him on speakerphone and I asked him, "What do you do?" And he gave me the rundown a little bit. And I was like, "Wait, so you're in court?" I was concerned about germs. This was pre-COVID. I'm like, I don't want to be in the courtroom. He's like, "You know what? I think you might like it." Everyone kept telling me I was a litigator. I didn't understand what that meant either. And I figured, I had the opportunity. I already had, luckily, a job locked down where I was. And I said, and I kept hearing how easy it is to get pigeonholed the first couple of years into something that you might not like. So I figured I'd explore and see what was there. What did I have to lose by trying out this gig? And I never turned back. My first assignment was with the Family Protection Unit. I have my family history involves being domestic violence survivors, so that really resonated. I grew up in Mexico, even though I was born in Texas. I grew up in neighborhoods and in a system where we don't really trust police, and it's just based on the inherent nature of how the system was. You would be able to pay your fines up front. You would get pulled over when you really didn't have a violation, but it's just because in the particular area I was at, it was hard for policemen to make payroll. So I grew up with a distrust of law enforcement. And then once my mom decided to leave my father, we were back in the US. I realized some certain protections that we were afforded, and that kind of all just came full circle once I was interning with the Family Protection Unit in our office. I had no idea that just because we don't file a case, we actually still help victims. I didn't know that before we file a case and interfere with someone's life, we actually do roundtables to consider the pros and cons. Can we ethically bring this before 12 jurors and convince them? I didn't know the camaraderie that existed. It's so different from a law firm environment where it's every person for themselves, because you want to make sure you secure that clerkship, and then you want to make sure you secure an associate position, and then you want to make sure that you build the 2,000 hours, and then you want to make sure you're on that partner track, because if you're not, they're just going to switch you in for the next person that's just as eager. When I came to the DA's office, just as an intern, there's folks sitting in other people's office discussing a case. There's someone who offered me to jump on to their mock interview to say, hey, you should like work for our office. And I said, hey, I have 0 courtroom experience, and this post-bar clerkship interview is in 2 weeks, and I've only been here for 1.5. So the fact that other people are willing to invest in people that were going to come on board was very attractive to me. And then I realized that we do legislative efforts, that we focus on actually having a good reputation in the community and kind of earning some of the community's trust by either working with high at-risk youth with some of the programs that were mentioned with our outreach and mentorship programs. There's chances, I'm a native Spanish speaker. People wouldn't think that with my last name, but I've been sent several times to do anti-bullying conversations in the like Spanish speaking areas of San Diego in order to show people what we also do to help parents equip themselves for threats for online predators as well. And these are things that were really appreciated by the community because they have the problems. They just don't have the bridge to connect a potential solution or even just more information on where to report it or how to get more information to keep their kids safe. So little things like that are kind of what drew me to the office. And I keep learning more and more each time. It's like, I just feel like I keep lifting rocks and I'm like, oh, look, there's something cool in here. And like, oh, look, we also work really close with our law enforcement with certain investigations, whether it's with human trafficking, with gangs operations. So that's actually, I have a cell phone full of law enforcement phone numbers now. And it's actually helped me personally too, just have greater trust in like law enforcement. So those are the few things that kind of really drew me to the office and have kept me here.
Well, I think what you're highlighting is a couple of things: the evolving role of the prosecutor and the wide variety of things that can happen in a prosecutor office. You know, I think everybody who don't know, they just figure you're just sitting around throwing people in jail and trying to figure out for how long. But I want to make sure that, so thank you for those insights. Stephanie, and I want to make sure we give Stephanie and Alphonse time to tell their story as well. So Stephanie, what brought you to the DA's office?
Yeah, so initially, same as Malik, I didn't have any idea what the DA's office was when I went to law school. I actually didn't know what area of law I wanted to focus on. I played sports in college. I played at a small D1 university playing softball. And so I was really into, maybe sports law, maybe being an athletic director. And I remember actually talking to Noelle at Cal Western kind of about the different career paths. I didn't know much. I didn't really know much about criminal law or anything like that. And so I did various internships. I interned at a private firm. I interned at USD in their athletic legal compliance department. I really thought that was the way I was going to go. I was the president of the Entertainment Sports Law Society. And then I come from a military background. My brother's active duty. My dad was in the Air Force. And so it was kind of just a small discussion as far as looking into the JAG Corps. And I applied for an internship. My 2L summer, I interned as a civilian at Fort Bragg, North Carolina for the 18th Airborne Corps and absolutely loved it. The camaraderie, the physical fitness aspect, the fact that there were so many various areas of law that you could kind of, dip your toe in, I guess you could say. And so I decided to go that route. And it was, an amazing experience. I absolutely recommend anybody who talks about the JAG Corps to me to do it. And when I joined the JAG Corps active duty, you don't really get to pick your job. The Judge Advocate General wants every judge advocate to be a well-rounded attorney. And so I got lucky though. And my first assignment was, as they called it, a trial counsel. It's a prosecutor at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington. That's where I was stationed in 2015. And I was a prosecutor for 3 years there. And that was really how I grew my love for criminal law. They call it military justice. And it was something that I grew passionate about. It was like, why didn't I know about this in law school? And I think also looking back, I was talking to Sophia about this, is in law school, there's kind of like a stigma. If you don't intern at the DA's office, or if you don't intern at the city attorney's office or have any prosecutorial experience, there's no way that they're going to accept you when you apply right out of law school to work for one of those prosecuting agencies because you don't have the experience. And so it was me being in law school and not knowing what I wanted to do, I think kind of put me at a disadvantage into applying to the DA's office right out of law school. My experience and my love for criminal law kind of came, when I was already in a career, which I don't think much people have that experience. And so not only did I experience being a prosecutor in the JAG Corps, but I was also the senior defense counsel at Fort Irwin. So I kind of saw both sides of the spectrum. And again, that just kind of grew my passion and love for not only public service, but for criminal law. I got out of active duty in October of 2019, just because I didn't want to move every 2 years and was looking to settle down somewhere and wanted to come back to San Diego. And at the time, again, with the DA's office, the timing, the DA's office only hired once a year. And I think the application was posted in January. And when I came out, or when I transitioned from active duty to the reserves, there was no open application. There's no rolling application. So the city attorney's office actually was hiring. So I went to the city attorney's office and loved it. Obviously, still, again, wanted to do my public service. And, what really got me wanting to apply to the DA's office was obviously trying more serious felony level cases, those types of cases that I tried in the JAG Corps, the reputation that the DA's office had in San Diego. And it was actually an encounter that I had with a DA at the courthouse, super generous and nice and always willing to help out whenever I called or had a question or whatever. And so, it was just those types of things too that drew me to the DA's office. As far as, trying to find out more about the office, I really utilized the website. Not being a San Diego native, although I went to San Diego for law school, I was gone for 5 years in the military. And when I came back, I didn't really know much about what was going on in San Diego County. And so the website kind of drew me even more to the DA's office. There's a lot of collaborative courts that our DA, Summer Stephan, has kind of initiated, and is an extremely progressive office. In particular, the Veterans Court that we have here kind of drew my attention to the DA's office as well. And so, luckily I applied and they liked me and they picked me. And so I joined this office last year. And again, I know, looking back, I love it every single day. I feel like this is the best job. If I would have known really what the job entailed and what I would be doing, when I was in law school, there would be no questions asked. I probably would have done everything I could have to join the DA's office right out of law school. But I think my lack of education in that, and that might be me, not really seeking out those opportunities, that might be the contributing factor. But, where I sit today, I have no regrets. So that's what kind of ended me up here at the DA's office.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. And I think you make an excellent point about the website, because many DA's offices do not spend that much time on their website. But Alphonse, we want to hear from you and what your thoughts are on this topic. You've been waiting so patiently.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you. And so when I was growing up, I don't think I ever would have fathomed being a prosecutor, being involved in law enforcement at all. I grew up in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia. Every day when I went to middle school, elementary, as well as high school, I passed Dr. Martin Luther King's house. In elementary, the principal followed us home and said that, oh, you lived outside the district, and tried to get us kicked out of the elementary school, to the point where Hosea Williams, who was Martin Luther King's right-hand man, had to stand up, protest, to make sure that I stayed in school. And that's just the upbringing that I had. That was the foundation that I had. So to say that what attracted me the most was something that has been echoed throughout the conversation, is the social justice, right? I'm one of those candidates. And going to law school, I don't think that I was interested in being a prosecutor as well. It probably wasn't until I was participating in moot court, doing the competitions, being a little bit successful in the competitions, where now I'm starting to think, okay, what can I do after I graduate, where I'm still doing the competitions, but in real life? And then there was the option, okay, you're going to be a defense attorney, you're going to be a public defender, or you're going to do prosecution. And just so fortunate I was to have a roommate whose father was a alum, and also he played for the Atlanta Falcons. And they said, oh, we go home often. And I was like, oh, when's the next time you guys are going back to Atlanta? And we happened to schedule the same time. We went out for lunch, and all I wanted to ask his father was, what's going on with the Falcons? How was it playing with Deion Sanders? How was just being an athlete? And he kept pivoting like, how are you going to stay in Syracuse? How can we get you to stay in Syracuse? What do you want to do? And we had that conversation and he said, okay, just do me one favor. I know you're kind of sold on Atlanta. Can you have a conversation with one of my friends? And that individual was someone who was a very, very higher up at the Onondaga County District Attorney's Office. And we discussed, we talked, and to keep it brief and short, I just felt valued, right? That someone of this importance, this significance is taking the time out their day to hear me as a person, and truly feel valued, right? And I decided to join the DA's office, and very similar to what my colleagues were saying, I think I had a genuine distrust of law enforcement growing up in the inner city. I was someone that felt like all the defendants are being wrong, they're being wrongfully accused. And you get in the district attorney's office and you start to see the evidence that's against them. And your opinion changes, one, but also now you're in this position to make the change that you were denigrating the system about, right? Now you're in that power to be that change. And you also, I love our office and the fact that they give us the discretion to say, you go to your bureau chief and say, I just don't feel comfortable prosecuting this case. And they're saying, okay, you have the leverage to say you dismiss those charges or reduce it down to what you think it should be. And just being a cog in the system of social justice change and that impact. Whereas I think that you are kind of pigeonholed, for lack of a better word, if you're a defense attorney, because your perspective is only for one person. Whereas as a district attorney, you represent the people, you represent the state, you represent. And so I'm gonna have to change my AirPod because it's about to die, but I'll end my statement there.
Well, so your personal stories seem to have a common theme, which was that there was some direct connection, almost coincidental, that introduced you to what a prosecutor's office does and changed your mind about whether this is a job for you. Do you have any recommendations? I mean, many of the people who are listening to this webinar are those who are trying to recruit and retain people of your caliber. So we have just a few minutes left. I'd like to just see if you could tell us what you, and this way we'll go in reverse. So I'll start with you, Alphonse, and just see, I mean, you obviously talked about, that personal connection and how a senior person spoke to you, but what's your recommendation about what, the more senior staff and prosecutor offices should be doing to recruit people like the three of you?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is to stop preaching to the choir. I know that was previously said, but go to other organizations, go to different places, and don't get the prototypical prosecutor. We live in a different age. We live in a different climate, no matter what spectrum you stand on, but everyone wants to make change and everyone wants to be heard. And if people actually understood what district attorneys actually do, I think a lot more people would be interested in creating that impact and being that voice for the people that cannot be heard, and making the conversation truly about victims, right? And not so pigeon or pointed towards what defendants are, right? We represent victims, we represent someone that's been hurt, and we're trying to bring them justice. Yeah,
well, thank you. Yeah, very interesting. Can I just ask you, are you asked in your office to go speak to law students? Do you do any work on recruitment in your office?
I do. And I was the Black Law Student Association president, so I always want to reach out. I always want to help out as much as I can. Being a first generation law student, not having anyone to bounce ideas off of, it was extremely difficult. You're kind of just going through the motions and feeling what's right. That's your next step. So whenever I can, I try to reach out and I try to make myself available as much as I can.
Right. Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
I would just like to backpack off Alphonse. I think reaching out to the specialty bar organizations in your area is huge. When I was in law school, I was the vice president of APALSA, but I was still actively involved in the professional bar associations like FALSD, which is the Filipino American Lawyers of San Diego, PALSD, which is the Pan Asian Lawyers of San Diego, just to try to get networks and connections. But I had mentors in those organizations. And so if, we had DA's offices who reached out to them and tried to organize some sort of mixer or function to kind of, talk about the office or talk about open positions or application time or whatever, I think that would also kind of provide an avenue to law students rather than just going maybe directly to the law school. I think reaching out to the other specialty bar organizations, especially since San Diego specifically, I mean, we're very diverse. And I think that is kind of what prosecution agencies are starting to look like. And so I agree with Alphonse on all of that aspects. I think it's important and to talk to diverse law students and let them know, hey, there are people in our community that you can represent just like you, and I think that's huge.
And are you doing anything personally with regard to recruitment, or, I mean, not that you would have to, but just curious.
I'm not in my capacity as a DA. I mean, informally, I obviously talk about the DA's office, and but I am part of our NAPIPA, which is the National Asian Pacific Islander Prosecutors Association. I try to still be involved with high school students doing mock trial stuff, and so I don't necessarily formally recruit, but more so informally.
Right. Well, that is great, and also to do that kind of work in high schools is terrific. Malik?
So when I had my juice bar, one thing people would always come and tell me like, hey, do you want to advertise in this magazine, etc. And I tried it for a bit, and I found out that the best way for me to get people in my door was to get the product in their hand. So I would just make 100 juices on the
2 minutes left
and go hand them out. And what I found out what's working in the office here is I just go in the community. I'm one of the people that has been brought on to help with the recruitment. And just last week, I went to USD, and I started younger. I started with the pre-law fraternities and sororities and the societies they have at USD, for example, to get folks that are interested in law school and try to plant the seed beforehand. And the one thing that I've been doing to try to get the product in their hand is I tell them, hey, here's my email address. Do you want to come shadow me and see what I do? So I've had a few people when I was over in East County doing the family protection unit assignment. I had 3 students come separately on different turns to just kind of see what we do, see how we work with defense attorneys. Took them to go see some hearings for some other folks that were in court. And I've done some recruiting, or I teamed up with my old school, and I reached out to one of the counselors. They said, I'm like, hey, look, I'm still hired with the DA's office. Do you have more people that don't know what they're doing and are curious? Because it's a win-win. Even if you have someone come intern to you or see your office and it turns out it's not a good fit for them, they don't like them, but you treat them well, that's still a member of the community who either has a friend that might be in law school because law students are bonding over their trauma of law school, or you're still reaching out to other members of the community that might be victims of a crime, or on the other end might know someone or themselves might find themselves being a suspect or a potential defendant. So if they know that they're getting a fair shake whenever they come through the criminal justice system, or they know that there's other routes when someone they know or care about might be facing charges, and there might be a second opportunity that our office cares about, either through one of the collaborative courts or just in general, knowing that you're treated fairly, I think that's the best way to, in a sense, kind of get the product in folks' hands. And yeah, slowly we are becoming an office that is as diverse as the people we represent. But a lot of that also has to do with the reason I'm focusing on universities right now is we got to get people of color like myself into law schools. And then we have to make sure that once they're in there, they're actually going to be able to set themselves up for success to pass the bar as well. Because once you get a better feeder program, then you'll truly be able to reflect the population that you're serving.
Yeah, no, these are all excellent points. We have just a few minutes left of this presentation. I don't know if you, one of the three of you, want to just say just a couple of final words before we turn to our goodbyes and the survey, because we do hope that everybody, if we could get the survey posted, so we could get that lined up. But do the three of you have any sort of last words of wisdoms to this group that you would like to add?
I'll say what I say in my blog year. I'm very upfront right from the get-go. I'm like, I'm here to make sure I pick the right jury. And one thing I do that just address the elephant in the room, whatever the issue in my case is. Right now, I think one issue that we can all agree on is the bad rap that prosecution and prosecutors have right now because of podcasts, because of true crime, what have you. And one thing I address right from the get-go when I go speak to these kids, I'm just like, who here has seen this documentary? Who here thinks prosecutors can be crooked? And just kind of actually have a conversation to try to shift their perception and be like, look, just like in any profession, or just like in Yelp, you're going to have good restaurants, bad restaurants. You're going to have a good dentist recommendation, or someone that's going to say, no, don't go there, or hairstylist, and just kind of show them and personalize the fact that we're also people fitting into a larger box of what our societal role is. But just a few don't represent everyone. And I think that's one thing that's kind of gone the discourse going, and it shows people that we are human too.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Address the elephant in the room. Anything, not required, but anything, Stephanie or Alphonse, any last words of wisdom for us?
I'll jump in.
Okay, let's go ahead. Right.
Sorry. Just that we're in a service of customer service, and to look for people that are going to be making your clients happy, that can relate to people, and just the things that you should be looking on resumes are jobs of customer service, where you have to provide that customer service to the people. Because the victims are the ones that are going to spread those Yelp reviews and boost whatever credibility that you need boosted. And start small, and as you diversify your office, it's going to benefit everyone, having that one diverse person who's going to change other people's views, and their views are going to change. It's just going to spread like wildfire, I think.
Yeah. Stephanie, any thoughts?
I echo Alphonse's and Malik's sentiments. So.
Thank you so much, because I think you do give us a very realistic and important perspective that so much of this is the personal relationships, and addressing, as you said, the elephant in the room, but then explaining the wonderfully diverse and evolving role of a prosecutor, that this is not the prosecutor of 30 years ago. Most offices have evolved and are doing so many interesting things.